What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. Alright, so here's the situation we have for you ladies and gentlemen. We have a few things that we want to talk to you about today. First thing we want to talk to you about is a potential area of interest that we're looking at in the Eastern Pacific. I was kind of paying attention to it for the last little bit, and I wanted to kind of give a quick update on that since I haven't done that yet. But the main meat of this video is just kind of me talking about the threats for the Gulf Coast, particularly around Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and the coast of Florida over there as well. And to kind of talk about the threat level and kind of where I think that in the Gulf Coast for hurricane season the greatest threat will be. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and jump right into it right here. Let's go ahead and start with this area of interest right here, the coast of southern Mexico. An elongated area of low pressure is located several hundred miles south of Mexico, and it continues to produce disorganized showers and thunderstorms. Development appears to be unlikely as the system will be moving little during the next day or two. Formation chance is going to be 10% in the next 48 hours. I'm just kind of paying attention to it right here. I personally don't think there's going to be that much of a shot for it to really develop. I mean, the warm water is absolutely there, but I want to take a quick look at the wind shear in that region. Actually, it's in pretty favorable wind shear conditions, but what is the dry air looking like over there? I want to see what the air is looking like. Here's the water vapor that we're looking at. Yeah, there is. Yeah, it's mainly just a factor of it just being disorganized, not being able to develop, although I am paying attention to it quite closely as we continue to look into it right there. There is some areas of dry air surrounding it, but overall, I wouldn't be too worried about that as of right now. But with that out of the way, we're going to go ahead and kind of pivot and talk about the threat that I'm seeing for the Gulf Coast and kind of what is my prediction for where the greatest threat is going to be. So with that being said, let's go ahead and dive right into some of the stuff that I am paying attention to. We're going to be going over some factors right here. We're going to be going over just kind of what factors to potentially look out for right here. We're obviously going to be seeing a lot of new information coming out. We're going to start with the CANSIPs right here. And what we're mainly going to do is we're going to be using this for three things. First of all, the moisture component. Second of all, the wind shear component, which will not be on the CANSIPs, but we can use other ways to figure that out. And the third component I want to use is the main sea level pressure anomaly, and that's something we'll go ahead and do first. So that's what we have going on right here, and the reason I'm using the main sea level pressure anomaly is to kind of indicate what the sea level pressure is going to be. Is it going to be greater than average? Is it going to be less than average? And what kind of indications will that bring going forward? So essentially, this is how weather works. If you have higher pressure, you don't have thunderstorms. If you have lower pressure, you have thunderstorms and you have bad weather. So that's what we're potentially looking at. And across the Atlantic Ocean, but especially in the Gulf of Mexico and parts of the Caribbean Sea, we are seeing some very strong low pressure anomalies right there. In some cases, up to 2 millibars below average, not just in one area either, and not just for one day, but for the entire month, and for a pretty synoptic scale area. Synoptic scale is essentially a large scale situation right there. That's how it is in layman's terms right there. Month of July is going to be interesting as well. Taking a look at this, we are seeing this lower pressure than average. Another thing I'm paying attention to right here is the Bermuda High and how far out that extends. Now, where we are at in July, this is what we have as a typical setup for that. That's why in the month of July, kind of where this is oriented, we see tropical systems move much further to the south in the month of July than we do in the month of August or the month of September. The month of August, you do see a bit of a weakening with this going on right here, but that allows it to push kind of deeper into the Caribbean and deeper into the Gulf of Mexico over there, just to kind of give you an understanding of what we're looking at. And for the month of August, we are seeing a general decrease of pressure on average across the Atlantic, across especially the Gulf of Mexico and around areas around Texas and Louisiana, although Veracruz is also going to be interesting to take a look at right there. And that's predominantly a big issue that I'm paying attention to. That coupled with the possible moisture that's kind of coupled with it, there is definitely going to be a lot more moisture than average this year. We've been going over this every tropical video we've been talking about, and that's what that's generally going to do is it's going to allow for a lot more moist air, and it's going to allow for a better environment for things to organize and develop. So that's what we're paying attention to right here, and that's why I'm going over all this stuff right here. Now let's go ahead and move into September. September, it looks like, to me in September, it looks like the lowest area of low pressure right there kind of just starts to pivot out of the Gulf and more towards the Atlantic basin. That's typical when you see hurricanes start to organize and really start to fire up. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on as well, and something to pay attention to, especially for areas in the Atlantic basin, but we're mainly focusing on the Gulf today. So that's what we're paying attention to as of right now. Unfortunately, we don't really have the shear anomalies to really work with. I wish we did, but we don't. Unfortunately, we do have this right here. And for the month of September, those moisture anomalies start to pivot away from the Gulf and start to pivot more towards the Atlantic basin. So overall, my biggest thing I'm paying attention to is kind of the timing of when these significant threats could start. And personally, based off of what I'm looking at with the moisture as well as the pressure levels as well, it could be a situation where we could see something, maybe like a tropical storm or something, maybe in late July, and then into August we start to see stuff really ramp up as we do typically for hurricane season. And then the month of September, we start to see less of a Gulf threat and more of an Atlantic basin threat as the Bermuda high starts to pivot and starts to shift away from the Azores Islands and more towards around the Bermuda region. So with that being said, we're also going to be paying attention to one other factor across what we're looking at right here. This is the global sea temperatures right here for the Gulf of Mexico. Global sea surface temperatures right now are primed for hurricane development. Now, obviously, that's not going to happen in the month of June unless the wind shear field around it collapses, and we'll get to that in a second. But 28 plus degrees Celsius waters across the region right here is something you do not want to mess around with. That's, in layman's terms and in U.S. Numbers, about 82 degrees Fahrenheit, which is more than enough for hurricane development already if you take this value by itself. We're also seeing a lot of areas of 30 degrees Celsius across parts of the Gulf, around especially the Bay of Campeche, and even into the Caribbean around Cuba and those areas right there. However, what I'm paying attention to is just kind of see the evolution of this pattern, and as these waters continue to warm up and as they do at a very rapid rate throughout the next 2 to 3 months, I want to see how this is going to go, and if we're going to see an area of 30 or even 32 degrees Celsius around a lot of areas in the Gulf of Mexico, because we've been seeing it with the loop current. That hasn't cooled down really that much this winter. Caribbean hasn't cooled down that much this winter, and that's going to play a huge role into the loop current as well as possible systems moving in. So that's what we're paying attention to right now. Ocean heat content is something I'm also paying attention to. The loop current is absolutely primed right there for when it comes to OHC right here, well over 100 to even some areas over 150 OHC in some of these areas in the loop current. So that in itself is a pretty concerning thing to take a look at. But what we are not seeing as much of right now is that kind of reciprocating across much of the Gulf of Mexico right now, and it's early. It's going to take some time to do that. But one thing I will say is that this is just, keep in mind, this is early June, and we're already seeing OHC values outside of the loop current over 100 OHC, kind of in the central Gulf off the coast of Louisiana right there. So that's something I'm paying attention to, and that is expected to continue to grow at a very quick rate over the next 3 months or so. So that's what I am paying attention to when it comes to that. And the climate reanalyzer analysis right here, what we're looking at is, it's pretty interesting to take a look at. Let's go ahead and refresh to see if we can get the latest intel. Already across the Atlantic, we are very primed for stuff to happen. We are about we're about a half degree Celsius above schedule from last year. So that might be a big role into why this hurricane season maybe gets incredibly active. We go ahead and show you the SST anomaly map. Some of the biggest SST anomalies outside of like the Florida Keys and the Isle of Youth area of Cuba are in the western Gulf of Mexico over here. Like, these anomalies are incredibly warm and incredibly alarming to take a look at right there. Close to 3 degrees Celsius above average already. and that's a pretty concerning thing to take a look at. And that's gonna because already we have hurricane waters right there primed up for development. The only area that's below average is the area in the Yucatan Peninsula, and that's pretty typical around this time of year. That's always where it's usually cooler and everything like that. Right there, but that's pretty interesting, especially around Texas and Louisiana, though. That's where those anomalies are for those living in the United States, Mexico. It's mainly concentrated in the Bay of Campeche, but outside of there, Texas, Louisiana, into much of Florida right there, something to pay attention to right there. Wind shear is right now not going to be too big of an issue as of right now. The wind shear is, as of right now, very strong across the Gulf region right there. So that's why you're not going to see development happening in June. It's going to be the wind shear right there, not so much the dry air, but just the strong wind shear that is going to be happening right here. So that's something that I am keeping an eye on. But here's another thing I'm keeping an eye on, and that is the wind shear anomalies. Right now, the wind shear anomalies are around average for the month of June, mainly because of the Enso cycle moving from a El Nino to a neutral phase. As of right now, you're going to see oscillations going up and down with that, but it is trending towards a La Nina. We've talked about this previously with the whole climate report right there. We don't need to go through that again. Ocean analysis, we can kind of take you through that again. There has been a bit of a rebound in region 4 right there, which is stopping this from being a neutral phase, but it is trending on the downward path right there, and that's why you're going to see so much more tropical systems activate in the Gulf of Mexico than maybe we saw last year, because what you're going to see is optimally, if you want a strong hurricane season, you're going to see a stronger pressure gradient between the Bermuda High and the tropical waves that move through. You're going to see a lot more warm waters, which obviously we're already seeing right now. We're also seeing a few other factors that and everything like that, such as the MJO. I've been talking to some of my guys on Storms United. They've been telling me that the MJO could enter an active phase for parts of the Atlantic Ocean starting around mid to late June, and that's something to pay attention to as we continue to pay attention to all the factors involved right there, because what the MJO does is it enhances convective activity, and it allows for a greater possibility for tropical cyclones and tropical storms to organize and develop, although it doesn't factor in everything such as the wind shear and moisture, everything like that as of right now. And speaking of wind shear, we can go ahead and show you the CFS monthly, even though it's not the most optimal thing to take a look at, but in this case we will take a look at it for like wind shear anomalies as of right now. Month of June, we are going to be seeing weaker wind shear than average in the Southern Gulf according to this model run right now. We're going to be seeing around average to stronger wind shear than average for the month of August, according to this. I would take this with a grain of salt because in my opinion, I don't think it's really factoring in the Enso region that much, but we'll pay attention to that as we continue. And then the month of September, wind shear really gets strong across much of the Deep South. We'll have to pay attention to that. But optimally, what we're seeing with this is we're going to be seeing overall a weaker wind shear pattern than average, and we're going to be seeing a few more storms than we saw in years past. Now, this is the part where you're waiting for. What do you think is going to be the greatest threat for the Gulf? Where do you think the greatest threat's going to be? Well, it's going to depend on a few factors like I've just been alluding to. It's going to be depending on the warm water, ocean heat content, what the wind shear on average is going to be, as well as a few other factors such as dry air and everything like that. But climatologically speaking, I do think that the top two states that I would be worried about are Texas and Florida for obvious reasons. It's usually Louisiana and Florida, but not this time, and that's mainly because you're going to see a stronger Bermuda High than what we were seeing in years past. You're going to see a stronger pressure gradient between that and the tropical cyclones that do organize and develop starting later into the season, and that's going to end up pushing the storm further to the west. And that's going to be a problem if you live in the Texas area right there. In fact, a lot of climatologists have been warning that Texas and is going to be especially impacted this year. There's a greater risk for that, at least. The hazard's always there, but there's a greater risk and a greater probability of a hurricane striking the Texas coast this year. Louisiana, I would also not rule out either for maybe an impact right there. Mississippi and Alabama, I'm not 100% sure right now, predominantly just due to the climatology just not being as thorough for these states right there. But the coast of Florida, especially the southwest coast of Florida and southern coast of Florida in general, is looking at that risk right there. And that will be the premise of this next video of the Florida impacts as we continue on looking at the possibilities of these hazards happening. We're going to keep you updated here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. It helps us out, helps us make more videos like these. The goal of this channel, as always, is to get more people engaged with weather. If you want to help us out this hurricane season with forecasting, or you just want to hang out and kind of see the behind the scenes of these Pat's Path Predictor videos, be sure to join the Storms United Discord server. The link to that is right over there. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.